Welcome to another episode of the Baby Let's Talk podcast. Today we're diving deep into the heart of nutrition, health and environmental sustainability with a special guest, Dr. Simen Løseth, a fellow medical doctor who shares a passion for understanding how our diet impacts both our health and our planet. In this episode, we're taking a critical look at the recently updated 2024 Norwegian Dietary Guidelines, which are, like all dietary guidelines in the Nordic countries, based on the 2023 Nordic Nutrition Recommendations. Simen is a medical doctor specializing in psychiatry. He currently works at a psychiatric outpatient clinic at Diakonhjemmet Hospital in Oslo. Simen has a passion for nutrition and holistic health, and he believes that this is the most important area of focus to stop the development of obesity in the population, which is the leading contributing cause of chronic disease in today's society. He therefore started his Instagram and TikTok profiles, which I will link to in the show notes below, to spread knowledge on nutrition and health. One of the most important things for our mental health is good physical health, and furthermore, one of the most important and concrete things that we can do to achieve better physical health is to ensure good food quality as we become what we eat. Now, in our discussion, we systematically explored each section of the Norwegian Dietary Guidelines, focusing on some points of debate, such as the recommendation to reduce red meat intake, and we also expressed our concerns towards the heavy endorsement of grain products and the promotion of vegetable oils as healthy options, questioning whether these recommendations are truly beneficial for health or sustainable for the environment. Throughout the episode, we unpack the implications of these guidelines, offering our perspectives on what could be improved to better support individual health and environmental goals. So join us as we delve into these topics, bringing to light the complex interplay between dietary recommendations, health outcomes, and environmental impact. This episode is a must-listen for anyone interested in understanding the deeper nuances of dietary guidance and how it aligns, or doesn't, with optimal health practices and ecological sustainability. On to the podcast. Hi, Simen, and thank you for coming on to my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Could you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself? Who are you and what do you do? What are you passionate about?
Of course. As you said, my name is Simen. I live in Moss, in Jeløya, in Norway. I go the specialization in psychiatry as a medical doctor. I'm a couple of months away of being finished, and a couple of years ago, I kind of by randomness stumbled upon some themes within nutrition that got my attention, and then I kind of along the path got the idea and the insight that maybe nutrition is more important for our mental health than we have been thought or what we have believed in before. And and also kind of learned about something in nutrition that maybe is more regarded as myths. And slowly I've been trying to incorporate this in my medical practice a little bit, and I have the feeling that it helps in both mental health conditions and physical health. And so my encouragement is just being gradually higher and higher. And nutrition is one of the themes, but I'm very passionate about holistic health, to find what is low-hanging fruit to get better physical and mental health. And there are many things that we can talk about. Nutrition is just one of them. But my social media platforms obviously emphasizes the importance of nutrition. And I do think that's one of the key things to get better physical health, but also to get more robust mental health, directly and indirectly.
Yeah, I came across your social media platforms through my husband to begin with. And I think your message is just really empowering and really, really important. And I feel like you were the first, at least in Norway, where I also live, that I found that was kind of talking about this openly. And there's so much that I'd like to talk to you about. And the first thing that I kind of want to cover is the Western dietary recommendations or guidelines, and most countries, the Nordic countries, have been publishing new dietary recommendations either last year in 2024 or now in 2025. And we both live in Norway, and you have been quite vocal about the dietary recommendations that were published here last summer, fall. So should we just go through them roughly and talk about the major points?
We can try that if we don't stumble upon too many what do you call it, digressions.
Yeah.
Let's try it.
Let's try at least. So the Norwegian dietary recommendations were published last year, and they're based on the Nordic Nutrition Recommendations published in 2023. And if we talk about just the Western countries, the US dietary recommendations that are currently out there are the 2020 to 25 recommendations. Next update is expected to be published in the end of this year, I think. But there are many similarities between the Nordic recommendations and the US recommendations, and we can maybe touch on those a bit as we go. But most of the Nordic countries have been publishing their recommendations. Norway, Finland, Denmark published theirs last year. Iceland, I saw now in January, and Sweden will be publishing theirs soon. And in an Icelandic article that I read now a couple of weeks ago, it says that all of the recommendations are similar and all based on the Nordic nutrition recommendations. So since you and I live in Norway, we can just go over the Norwegian recommendations here in our talk, I think. And just in short, I wrote down the basics of the new Norwegian recommendations. So the updated Norwegian dietary recommendations promote a plant-based diet, emphasizing increased consumption of fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and nuts to improve health and reduce environmental impact. And the guidelines suggest limiting red and processed meats to 350 grams per week, highlighting the health and ecological benefits of reduced meat consumption. And then emphasis is placed on healthy fats from nuts, seeds, vegetable oils, while reducing a reduction in sugar intake. Dairy and sustainable seafood are recommended in moderation, with a push for water as the primary beverage. And then social meals and mindful eating are also encouraged, respecting Norwegian culinary traditions. ChatGPT helped me with this summary here. So if we just get into this point by point, the first point, the plant-based focus. So the guidelines strongly emphasize a shift towards a more plant-based diet, like they said. This includes increasing the intake of fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and nuts. And as I understand, this shift is meant to address both human health and also environmental sustainability, and that the aim is to reduce the environmental impact of food production, particularly emissions linked to livestock farming. And I read that this is the first time that the recommendations take into account the environmental aspect of food production. What do you think about this one? Are cows destroying our planet?
I think context matters. Big Food and the agriculture business, Big Ag, the way of producing meat in that way is not good either for the climate, environment, or for the animals.
Yeah.
It is possible to do better, and the key here is regenerative farming, that you play along the rules of nature.
Yeah.
And what study says is that both meat quality and plant quality go up in the presence of both. So the one does not exclude the other.
Yeah.
And the key here is also soil quality.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is also very, I find it very difficult to believe logically, and also studies says the same thing, is that when animals, primarily ruminant animals, which is cows, bison, lamb, goat, etc., when they eat local grass, the production of feces will increase the nutrient quality of the soil, which again increases the nutrient content of the grass, and then better meat, etc. And this will also increase the carbon capture in the soil, which the amount of carbon that is captured in the topsoil is a lot bigger than what we maybe have thought before. And the belief that I try to buy most of my meat local from directly from farmers in my area, and the cattle usually have only eaten locally produced grass. And to say that that's more environmentally impactful than buying soy or tofu from the Mediterranean or Southeast Asia or South America it's very hard to comprehend or believe that. And if we also want to become more self-sustainable, then eating in the regiment or in nature's path or with the resources that you have, then Norway, as a country where most of our soil is not even possible to do crop farming, but we have grassland, and when ruminant animals, they have the possibility to turn that grass into food that we can eat. And the food is highly bioavailable and nutrient rich. So if we want to be more self-sustainable, then we need to use the resources that we have, which is grassland, and the animals that can make that grassland into food for us is the ruminant animals. And they will increase the carbon capture in the soil from the grass that they eat, which is then it's better for the environment and it's better for the climate. And when you have either organic or regeneratively farming, and when you do practice that is more in respect of the animal, then it's also better for the animal welfare. And when we also take into account what happens when you do, for example, monocrop farming for wheat, soy, barley, whatever, the amount of insects that you have to kill in order to save the plant to make food, it's discussed in very little detail, and it's a very important topic. But when you have cattle on grassland, you actually increase the biodiversity of the soil and the amount of insects that are in the area. So it's another way to tackle the problem of less bees, less insects, less biodiversity in the soil, and so on. So my knowledge over the time have increased my consumption of meat, but less, as Diana Rogers and others says, it's not about the cow, it's about the how. So very emphasis on the way that we produce.
Yeah, exactly. It's many good points that you have there, especially, with regenerative agriculture. It increases the biodiversity and enhances the soil health, like you're talking about, and improves also the water cycle, sequestering carbon, etc. So the narrative that cows are inherently destroying our planet, I think that's overly simplistic and also can be very misleading.
I think it can be very dangerous to go down that path without thinking about the consequences of removing ruminant animals that have been a part of the ecosystem forever.
Yeah, exactly. And then the argument that you talked about with monocrop farming, that that somehow should be more beneficial for the environment, I find that very difficult to comprehend when we consider the full spectrum of environmental impacts that are associated with this agricultural practice. Because, monocrop farming, like you talked about, just a short, it involves growing the same crop on the same land year after year, right? That's how I understand it, right? Same crop year after year. So it significantly depletes the nutrients in the soil, it reduces the biodiversity, and can lead to soil erosion. And this also requires often intensive use of chemical fertilizers to replenish the nutrients in monocrop farming, which can then further degrade the soil health and contaminate water sources and so on. So in contrast to regenerative agricultural practice, including those involving livestock, they promote crop rotation and cover cropping that enhance the soil fertility and biodiversity, like you talked about. And then there's also the talk about pesticide and herbicide use. This talk, I feel like I feel like it's maybe more talked about in the US, because they have a lot more pesticides that are allowed to use than here in Europe.
Illegal
Yeah.
in the EU, glyphosate.
Yeah, exactly. But do you know how it is here in Europe? Is it truly such a big problem here in Europe like it is in the US? Do you know?
With pesticides?
Yeah.
As far as I know, it's better because the regulations in the EU are stricter.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, glyphosate is one of the examples that are not used in the EU.
Yeah.
Very happy about that because it correlates with a lot of problems with that use. Yeah, it also seeps into honey because bees go to the crops which are used. Yeah, so it's also a thing that people make glyphosate-free honey because seems to also be a problem there.
Yeah.
So as far as I know, it's better in the EU, but I don't know if it's. And I also think that going for organic is overall a safer option because it's more tightly regulated. But shaking your farmer's hand and asking them how their practice is a lot better again. And you can also seek out farmers who has the animal welfare brand, which is also a brand in Norway, which says something about the quality of the animal welfare.
Can we know, in regards to that brand, can we then know how the animals are being fed? Do they use, feed that is maybe not so good, like corn and soy? Or
I'm not 100% sure. I try to ask to emphasize that, for example, cattle have been fed only grass, because that also impacts the nutrient content, especially fat-soluble vitamins and omega-3. So you'll increase the chances of covering your omega-3 need by eating meat from cattle that have only gotten that are grass-fed and grass-finished. Many farmers finish off the last weeks, months with corn, soy to increase. And they get fat as humans do. So no surprise there.
Yeah.
The tactics overlap.
Yeah. So it's important to ask your local farmer, if you have access to one, how they're feeding them. Do you feel like they're always honest about how they feed their animals? Do they try to hide the fact that they feed them corn and stuff in the last couple of weeks?
Doesn't seem like it. I find them honest, at least to my experience. I believe I taste the difference of grass-fed and grass-finished minced meat, for example. Like when you've tried it, you can spot the difference on the store-bought variants. At least I think, but I know that I'm vulnerable for the placebo effect. It seems like a different texture, color, and taste. So
Yeah.
I feel that the honesty is reflected on the product.
Yeah. What can you tell me about the most common brands? I'm not going to name any brands, but the most common brands of minced meat, for example, that you find in Norwegian stores. Are they all good quality or?
It seems like most of them have product from Norway. They have the branding that says that it's from Norway. That's at least a start. Many stores have meat that are, for example, from Namibia. My local store has some meat from Namibia, which is crazy. So looking for the small sticker or brand that says that product is from Norway is at least better than having international meat, which is higher in often used more antibiotics. Norway is one of the countries with the most strict antibiotic use, which is it's a huge problem worldwide. So, but I mean, quality-wise, I mean, I buy it. I try to have as much direct consumption as possible, but not all of it. And sometimes it's because of convenience, because it's not frozen, etc.
Yeah.
The qualities, I think, is on average, for example, in Europe, I would think that the quality is on the higher standard on average. I don't have that many thoughts around the exact topic.
No. Now, what's your take on the improved human health part of a more plant-based diet?
As far as my knowledge has gone the last years, it seems to me that if one want to increase the amount of bioavailable protein, vitamins, minerals from the food that one eats, then eating animal products increases the chances of success significantly. Around 20 to 30% of the protein from plant is not absorbed. So if one is vegan and has, for example, a product with 10 grams of protein per 100, then you would need to increase that with 20 to 30% to reach your protein goals. So general recommendation is like 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. And depending on your activity level, then you would need to increase it. And the older we get, the worse the body is able to recycle proteins, because a lot of the protein in our body is just recycled amino acids. So the older we get, we need to increase the protein intake, and also humans that are in growth, so children, teenagers, etc., need higher amounts relatively. So in order to check that box off and to successfully maintain protein intake, it's a lot easier to do that through animal foods. Eggs, milk products, if that is something one likes and can tolerate, because there are some intolerance in either lactose or milk protein, or some proteins in eggs can trigger some people. But generally, the meats is tolerated a lot better. Like the amount of people that have intolerance to meat is very low compared to compared to vegetables. And also the vitamin and mineral content of animal foods is, for example, in meat. One can survive exclusively on only muscle meat. There are even a little bit of vitamin C in muscle meat, contrary to a lot of indications. And also when people have lower carbohydrate intake, the amount of vitamin C that you actually need goes down, because vitamin C and glucose, they compete in the transport above the gut barrier. So if you have lower carbohydrate intake, then you need less vitamin C to fuel your needs. There are, unfortunately, there are a lot of things in plants that can inhibit the absorption of vitamins and minerals, phytic acid or oxalates. One of the main reasons people get kidney stones is because oxalate interacts with calcium, making calcium oxalate stones. So if one ever have had unfortunate chance of getting a kidney stone, then they should get the information that you should avoid or limit the oxalate containing foods.
Yeah, that's often like spinach and things you think are really helping or making your
spinach,
smoothie.
cocoa, a
Yeah.
lot of the green vegetables. Yeah, the part of the plant that doesn't really want to get eaten, which is the roots and the stems and the leaves.
Yeah.
Generally, the parts of the plant that want to be eaten, like the parts that are filled with seeds, for example, a banana or a strawberry or a cucumber or a pepper, although pepper is also high in oxalate relatively. So, I mean, it's individually what you can tolerate, and also, well, the context is anti-nutrients. So nutrients that doesn't really fill you, but rather directly or indirectly extracts energy or makes it difficult for you to absorb the nutrients of the plant.
Yeah.
In order to bypass that problem, it's how can you effectively manage that? Well, increasing the amount of animal food, contrary to plant food, will increase the likelihood of hitting the target needs of vitamins and minerals.
Yeah, these are really important points that you point out there. Firstly, the anti-nutrients that can, inhibit the absorption of some minerals and vitamins, and also then the bioavailability of protein from plant-based foods or products. You maybe think that you're getting, throughout your day, if you're plant-based, totally, you think you're getting maybe 100 grams of protein per day, but you're only maybe getting 70 or 60 grams of protein because there's such a big portion of it that is not bioavailable, that we don't absorb into our body. So this is a really important point that I find also missing in all dietary recommendations. There's no talk about this. And I feel like when I get into maybe a discussion about this with someone who is someone like I was before, I was a true believer in the recommendations many years ago, and I swore by them. And I feel like when I sometimes talk about this, yeah, but what about the bioavailability of proteins and the anti-nutrients and so on, that I kind of just get a pushback and
also the quality of amino acids. You need all the amino acids to build. If you lack blocks in a Lego set, then you can't finish it, and that's what happens in the progress of making proteins from amino acids in the body. If you lack essential amino acids, protein synthesis stops, and the chances of getting all the essential amino acids is also increased when you eat animal foods, which is complete protein, as it's said, and it's less, or it's possible to find plant alternatives which are complete protein. But number one, it's more difficult to get it absorbed. Number two, the bioavailability is poorer, but it's possible, of course. But you need to be skilled, and you need to know about which foods are complete protein.
Yeah, exactly. I've been plant-based before, and I know the struggle that you're trying to, when you realize this, that you need to meet your amino acid, profile. If you eat meats, you get this full amino acid profile, but it's more difficult when you're only eating plant-based. So you're making sure that you get these amino acids from these plant-based foods and these amino acids from these. So it was like this puzzle piece, and it's really, I don't think that people are aware of this at all.
Protein is protein.
Yeah, exactly. So the discussion about this I find lacking. Do you enter discussions with nutritionists or anyone about this often, and how do you find that?
I have not been in a quarrel or something similar to that in the professional setting yet. It's more through the social media platforms maybe, but I find that my energy and time is wasted more than I can achieve. So I rather just spread my message through my channel.
Yeah.
And I find that more efficiently used time and energy. Yeah, but I'll let you know if I get into any concrete situations.
Yeah. And those who want to listen, they listen. It's like there's always someone who is going to argue.
Of course,
So that's
it's
a good
good.
point. We need to focus our energy on.
And I'm also like you. I believe the guidelines were the Holy Grail, and I was also a plant-based. I was never kind of vegan, but I had like the vegan days, and I was vegetarian a lot of time during my studies. And now that I'm kind of turned upside down, more or less, I find my life quality to be significantly better.
That's so nice to hear. That's kind of, I can relate to that journey there. One more point or thing regarding the plant-based focus. I see that, regarding whole grains, they specifically specify that whole grains should be a part of several meals per day in the Norwegian recommendations. That is, it is recommended to eat whole grain bread, whole grain crisp bread, cereal mixes, grains, whole wheat pasta, or other whole grain products as part of at least 2 meals per day. What do you think about this one? Norway is known for being the big bread nation. I experienced that coming from Iceland. There's not as much bread consumption there as it is here. But what do you think about this point?
I think it's problematic in it's many things to tackle there. Like a digression around the carbohydrate intake is that the recommendations are also emphasis on for around 40 to 60% of calorie intake per day should come from carbohydrates, and preferably grains and then whole grains. Okay, so it's a lot to unpack there. Like first and foremost, like 60 to 70% of the population in Norway is overweight. Overweight is a problem that arises in overweight people is that they become increasingly insulin resistant. So insulin resistant means that the cells in the body is not longer able to respond in a sufficient or good enough manner to insulin. So the sugar in the body or in the bloodstream is maintained too high because the cells are not taking it in. So when people are insulin resistant, they are overweight, and they are also recommended to have the largest portions of their meals and their calorie intake from carbohydrates. That's problematic because carbohydrates will increase the glucose, and the glucose will increase the insulin. And as long as insulin is maintained high, the body is not able to tap into the fat stores. And overweight people will want to, or it's at least the interest of the person and the health authorities that people lose body weight, because around 90% of all the diseases that we treat in the primary care facilities and in the hospitals is linked to lifestyle and especially what you eat. So overweight will correlate positively with all the diseases of chronic illness. And also it seems to correlate with increasing the chance of getting mental health issues like depression and anxiety. So in order to tap into the fat stores, we need to get insulin down. I'm not saying that people should go no carb. I'm saying lower. Like, what is your tolerance of carbohydrates? It's individually. If you're trying to lose weight, then it should be low. If one is not overweight and relatively active, then the carbohydrate intake can be higher. Some people perform better in the exercise manner if they have a little bit of carbohydrates. although it's different, and some people can get very efficient in the gym with a very low or even ketogenic diet when the body is adapted to making energy from the fat stores. So yeah, so and then again, okay, so that's the carbohydrate amount, which I think it's way too high. Maybe on average it could be 10 to 15% of your calories per day. But to making dietary guidelines that should like take in every people, it's very ambitious and naive, and it's impossible. But then again, it's dietary guidelines, and it's difficult to take in all people in that context. But there we know.
Yeah.
So whole grains, like the definition of a product being whole grain, as far as I've understood it, it's not the grain, but it's the content of the different parts of the grain. So you have the endosperm, and two other compounds of the grain, and when they are ratioed accordingly to the guidelines, then you can say that something is whole grain. But it can still be very refined. So the ability of that food to heighten the blood glucose and also insulin can still be quite harmful in the long run. And also, like grains, like the seeds are small plant babies, and they will, on average, have more chemicals in them to protect against being eaten. And that could, for some people, be stressful for the body or the gut, or maybe even linked to mental health issues, like correlation of gluten and mental health problems. Also, psychosis is, at least, it's very interesting. When you look at and Georgia Eid, like the psychiatrist that in 2024 gave out her book Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. She also included some like it's observational studies, but it's interesting that indigenous people that have been introduced for Western diet, especially corn, wheat, barley, beer, etc., the amount of schizophrenia increases significantly after the change in dietary patterns. And again, it's very hard to know if it's actually the wheat, or is it the gluten, or is it something else? Will the people sleep worse when they eat more corn? But it's at least interesting to see the correlation and the amount of psychotic diseases increases to the same amounts that are found in typically Western civilizations. So it's at least an interesting correlation, and I think it's a higher chance that it has something to do with the diet than that it does not.
Yeah, and many people have, I think, in recent years become more open to the fact that diet can actually affect what's happening in your brain. So you, as a psychiatrist, and you've been looking a lot into this, how do you feel people, do you get a lot of pushback from people that say, you're a medical doctor specializing in psychiatry, what do you know about nutrition?
Yeah, exactly. No, I thought that I would get more pushback, but I actually get more. I find that people are more interested than what I thought, and so I share kind of the same impression as also psychiatrist Christopher Palmer, which in 2023 wrote the book Brain Energy, where he emphasizes that cell biology has more to do with psychiatric illness, and that a lot of the diseases of mental health is metabolic disease in as parts of the grassroots. Not saying that that explains everything, but it explains a lot more than what we maybe have thought before. And he has the same. He works at Harvard, and he was also afraid to get this more pushback. But he also experienced the same, that people were more open, and that he actually were entertained to keep it going and increase the amount of energy used in the field, which is a positive thing. And I've also got small indications from my leader that I should hold small presentation and a small talk about what I think and what believe, and so I'm maybe also going to hold a presentation at another psychiatric institution in Norway in the spring, which is cool that people have actually gone to my social media that work in the public sector and invite me as a private speaker through my social media platform. It's not 100% sure that I will do it yet, because they need to do some final touches with their leaders, etc. But it at least is some interest there. And so I think it's something is happening. So yeah, regarding your question about pushback, I was expecting more. With my patients, I try to have it very open, that I try to emphasize the thing about food quality and going lower carb, not no, but lower. And that's relatively accepted also in the public health sphere, even though health authorities, government is not pushing low carb. Very many people see the benefit of doing lower carb to control weight. A lot of anecdotal data show very positive things. A lot of studies doesn't really show any benefit of going low carb, but very caveat there is that the studies often are in weeks or months, which is maybe too short.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if we move on to the reducing meat consumption, we've touched quite a lot about on this up until now, but in the guidelines or recommendations, there is a significant reduction in the recommended intake of red and processed meats. So the new guidelines advise limiting red meat consumption to 350 grams per week, which is a decrease from the previous 500 grams. And this is supposed to be in response to number one, health risks that have been associated with high meat consumption, such as cancer and cardiovascular diseases, and as well as the environmental impact of meat production. And we've talked a little bit about the environmental impact here, but there are a couple of things that I want to just mention here. Is the point on processed meats I think that we should absolutely limit all kinds of processed foods, whether that's processed meats, processed plant-based foods, whatever. But to place red meat under the same umbrella as processed meats like sausage, pepperoni, etc., I don't think that's appropriate. What's your take on this one?
I think, again, context matters. Yeah. So dividing processed meats and red meat is crucial. They are not the same. So a lot of studies also, when we look, and you probably know this a lot better than me, about doing research and the hierarchy of evidence, which is like on the top of the pyramid, we have meta-analysis, like analysis of several studies, which is meta-analysis of RCTs, like randomized control trials. In nutrition, we don't have that. There are some smaller RCTs, but most of the data is from observational studies, observational data, and
epidemiology. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's professional guesswork. It's very complicated. One thing is what the researchers find and what they are saying, but another thing is how the media kind of can twist the language to sound more positive and concluding that then it actually is health problems, and the intake of red meat correlate, but it doesn't mean that it's causality. Doesn't mean that it's actually something that it's that has something to do with each other. The amount of deaths in a swimming pool correlate with the amount of movies that Nicolas Cage have been in, but it doesn't mean that people are drowning more because he's in Hollywood. It's correlations.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm pinpointing it, but the thing is that people that eat more red meat are also, like, because of the unhealthy user bias, that they tend to have a more unhealthy lifestyle. And even though the study researchers says that they are respecting all the confounders and ruling out everything, for example, smoking, drinking alcohol, etc., it's impossible to rule out everything. Another bias that typically occurs is that you have recall bias, that you don't really remember what you have been eating. A lot of the questionnaires in the epidemiology studies, you can get one questionnaire that then you have to remember through a whole year how much you've been eating, about how much blueberries have you been eating. Who remembers that? I can barely remember what I've eaten like yesterday or at least 1 week ago. It's hard to remember. So it's very ambitious. It's a lot of things that makes the results flawed. Another bias is that people tend to report themselves better than they actually are. So if there's a question of how many alcoholic beverages do you drink during a week, okay, it's 5 to 7 or 8 to 10, 12 to 14. And if a person is I'm somewhere between 5 and 7, and they typically report themselves better because it feels better. How can you in any way kind of take that in? So yes, correlation of red meat and health problems correlate, but I do not think that they are in any way causally related.
Yeah.
And before the agricultural revolution, revolution was for around like 10-12,000 years ago. So around that time we started to make crops. Before that, most people believe that we have been hunter and gatherers. And when it's not season for fruits and vegetables, what can you eat as a hunter and gatherer? The thing that's left on your plate is meat, or fish, or maybe poultry, but animal foods in like an umbrella term. So the food that have provided us with nutrients for several 100,000 years, which is probably mostly red meat, is now villainized as a problem for the increasing chronic diseases. It's logically very hard to believe. And now we are blaming red meat. That is one of the main reasons that we are a planet dominant species. It's very hard to comprehend. And the studies, for example, on colon cancer and red meat, some of the studies is really difficult to understand how they logically can make the conclusion. I mean, some of the studies are on mouse. Okay, mouse are not humans, but yes, they are similar. I can buy into that. But some of the studies is like on genetically modified mouse that are prone to develop cancer. Is that relevant? And in what degree is it relevant? And I think the evidence in total it's very thin. And like evolutionary, we have evolved on red meat, and on average, the food that an animal have eaten for the majority of its existence is least prone to make disease. So like a lion eating meat, or a cow eating grass, a moose eating grass, that food is least the smallest chance of creating disease.
Yeah.
So if we have eaten mostly red meat, the chances of that creating disease is less likely.
Yeah, because we've kind of only been starting to see the increase in all of these chronic diseases since the,
100 years.
yeah,
Mm.
it's
Heart
100,
disease,
120 years.
heart disease, it's almost no data of heart disease before the 20th century.
Yeah, exactly. So the point about putting unprocessed red meat with processed meats in today's, scientific research world, I think it's just oversimplifies everything here, because I think, like you talked about, many of the studies are, they base on questionnaires that you need to firstly, remember everything that you ate for a long period of time. And also I remember some of these questionnaires, there's a lot of these questionnaires going on all the time in schools in Iceland regarding psychiatric health and diet and everything. And I remember many times in the questionnaires, red meat, and that was, if you were going to say, do you eat red meat or something, and then they had in brackets what was considered red meat. They often had like ham, pepperoni, processed food products with the red meat. And I didn't understand that at the time, but I remembered this the other day when I was thinking about this, that's how the questionnaires were. So it's kind of doomed to begin with for red meat, and processed meats and a delicious freshly cooked steak from a cow that has been grass-fed. This is two different things. Processed meats, they contain a lot of additives to enhance flavor, improve preservation, to maintain an appealing appearance. For example, nitrates, when they're cooked, they're used to cure meats like bacon and ham and hot dogs, and they help to preserve the meat and prevent bacterial growth and maintain the color of the meat. But when these substances are cooked or even just digested, they can form other compounds that have been linked to increased risk of cancer, and particularly colorectal cancer. So it's like, if you're doing a study and in your questionnaire, it's like you ask, do you eat red meat? And in the brackets, it says included is, beef, lamb meat, hot dogs, pepperoni, la la la. So they put this all under the same umbrella. But I have never, at least I don't believe in this, because I have not seen compelling evidence for a fresh, grass-fed, pure meat being problematic for humans. We have been, like you said, eating this for hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of years, without causing these diseases that are plaguing us today. So, yeah,
It's problematic. It's very problematic.
Yeah, it is. And I feel
Lump
like,
it all together.
yeah, and I feel like that, in the dietary recommendations, we should have some discussion about this, not just put these things under the same umbrella. I feel like in the Norwegian guidelines, at least, they just put this under one umbrella. They say reduce the intake of red and processed meats. Maybe there's some line where they say, a moderate amount of, or if you're going to eat red meat, that it's supposed to be, try not to eat a processed meat product. But I feel like they put this under the same umbrella.
They do.
But yeah.
I think so too.
Yeah. So that should be something maybe for the next guidelines, to maybe have a little bit more discussion about that. But if we move on to the next point, I know we're talking a lot about each point, but if we move on to the healthy fats and sugars, so in the guidelines, they continue to recommend the consumption of healthy fats, and they name the sources like nuts, seeds, and vegetable oils, exclamation mark, highly processed product. Okay, we can get back to that. And then they stress the reduction of sugar intake, especially added sugar, to combat, of course, obesity, diabetes, and other health issues. But if we take just the fat discussion first here, we can see that according to the recommendations that polyunsaturated fatty acids are considered the healthy fats and not saturated fatty acids from animal fat because of the increased risk of cardiovascular disease, and that unsaturated fatty acids lower LDL cholesterol. I mean, excuse me, I heard Dr. Chris Kenobi say this, who was a guest at in my podcast just before Christmas. He points out, so does arsenic. Arsenic lowers your LDL, but it doesn't mean that it's good for you.
No.
So it's like there are so many other things regarding vegetable oils, for example, who are often labeled as heart healthy, that have been proven to be really dangerous, but they're still proven or labeled as heart healthy, and we're still recommended to eat more and more amounts of these types of fatty acids. So what's your take on this one?
First and foremost, I can just say that I agree on the term of reducing sugar.
Absolutely.
It's fair, like reducing sugar and reducing alcohol.
Yeah.
Actually, as a dietary guideline, to say that no alcohol is better than some, yeah, I agree. I think so too. I mean, it's a guideline, so people will choose what they choose, and that's okay. So the sugar thing, I can just check that off, and I agree totally that reducing to a minimum or excluding it's fine. It's very good to read the label, and if you find something that is sugar content, then trying to replace it or make it at home. And also be aware that sugar takes, on the label, it takes a lot of forms, like sugar is one thing, but then you can have other names of sugar down the labeling line. So even though sugar is not the main content, then when you add up all the sugar label, then it can still be number one on the list. So people just have to be aware. If you're not sure, then you can just ask ChatGPT, list up the typical names of sugar on a label, and you can get a list, and you can it's easier for you to navigate.
Yeah, I think it's around 100 names that you can find when you ask this. It's ridiculous.
They just change a small, it's like the people doing illegal drugs. They just change a little bit on the molecular structure. It behaves just the same, but then you bypass the regulation.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is a healthy fat? Okay. It's also something to unpack there. It's like, in our development as humans, we have been exposed primarily to saturated fat and mono unsaturated. So saturated fat, they contains no double bonds, and the mono unsaturated fat contains one double bond, and then the polyunsaturated fatty acids, they contain two or more double bonds. And the double bonds are more prone to opening, so to say, and which has the potential to increase the chances of the fat to oxidize and create free radicals, especially on heating. So again, back to my point of what food is most probably going to serve your health. It's the food that's you as a species been eating the majority of the time. So if the majority of the time we have been eating monounsaturated fat and saturated fat, then the chances are that our cells, our mitochondria, are more equipped to handle those fatty acids in the biochemical pathways than polyunsaturated fatty acids. And what we see, observational data, of course, so a caveat, but people tend to store more polyunsaturated fat in their fat tissue now than before. It's been done many studies where people take a biopsy, so they take a test sample of the fat from humans, and the increasing amounts of polyunsaturated fats are increasing the past decades. and especially the linoleic acid, one of the omega-6. We need some omega-6, a small part. It's an essential fatty acids, but more is not always better. So it's like also observational that you could see that people with more omega-6 compared to their omega-3 have like higher inflammation markers and markers of direct or indirect on inflammation.
Yeah, because also metabolism, they compete with each other, omega-6 and omega-3. So if we're ingesting, like we've been doing for the past decades, a lot more omega-6 in relation to omega-3, we're maybe not even, able to use the little omega-3 that gets in, because we have so much omega-6 that competes for the metabolism with omega-6, omega-3, just a side note. So I think that's maybe where it stems from, that it's so much talked about today that we should increase our omega-3 intake. And I get that, because the ratio, we eat way too much omega-6 in correlation with omega-3. So we need more omega-3, or we could just lower the omega-6 intake maybe. And then
I think that's the safer option to know what foods typically contain high amounts of these polyunsaturated fatty acids, and then trying to limit those. And because eating, for example, fish oil high in omega-3, it's very difficult to get high quality oil, and even the highest quality oils can get rancid, and sometimes you can even do more harm than good because they are so prone to oxidation. So I think it's safer to just try to lower your omega-6 intake to balance out the omega-6 omega-3 ratio.
I agree with that.
So, and also that's another point of taking in grass-fed, rather corn-fed beef or meat, is that they are higher in omega-3 than omega-6. It's saying that the food that your food is eating, you are eating indirectly. That could not be more correct when it comes to, for example, cattle that either eats soy/corn or grass. It's important for the omega-3, omega-6 profile.
But what do you then think about the fact that they keep recommending more and more with each recommendation? It's 45 years ago since we started making these dietary recommendations, and I think they've been revised about 6 times now. And they keep upping the recommendation about vegetable oils, which are very high in polyunsaturated fatty acids. They range from everything from about, the typical seed oils range from about 20% polyunsaturated fatty acid content to 78%, I think. So what do you think about this one? They keep recommending more and more vegetable oil, yet we have a lot of data that shows that we're eating too much omega-6 in our diet, and too much of omega-6 linoleic acid is not good for our cells and for our cells' health and metabolism, and therefore our whole body's metabolism and health. What do you think about this one?
Well, there have been randomized control trials done in humans. The studies are old. What I would wish for is a more modern or a newer randomized control trials of vegetable oils in human health. But it's expensive to do, and you would also want people to have economic incentives to do it, which actually, like the food industry, would rather want it to stay status quo, because the vegetable oils are very profitable, they are very cheap, they are used as a filler, shelf life of the food increase, and it's also for restaurants. It's they use it also because they are recommended by the health authorities. So it's a business perspective. It's a no-brainer. The studies that have been done, the question is also, are they long enough? because I think the longest study that's been done is like around 8 years, and they say that the graphs fairly overlap when it comes to the rate of dying. At least one of the studies that I looked at 8 years, like on the last year, it seemed to be more people dying in the vegetable oil group. So the question is also, are the studies that have been done, are they long enough? How long time does it take for typical chronic disease to develop? 10, 20, maybe 30 years old to develop diabetes too. The body can compensate for quite a long time, and maybe people typically get it in their 40s, 50s, around that. So the question is, because people that tend to eat more vegetable oils or going for the seed oils that are recommended typically have better health because they are more conscious about it. It's the opposite of what we talked about a couple of minutes ago. It's a healthy user bias. That people tend to have better health or do have better health choices if a person is following the governmental advices. So it's in many studies, especially the observational ones, it correlates obviously. People who eat more vegetable oils tend to have better health. So the conclusion is easy to grab, that vegetable oils is part of the puzzle that makes people more healthy. But we have only eaten these oils for around 100 years, and as one of your guests, Chris Knobby, lays out that it correlates very scary, rather, with the amount of health issues on a longer span. When we are talking decades, it does not look very good in favor of the oils or the vegetable oils. And you can also see countries, for example, he talks about Japan, where like sugar consumption goes down, saturated fat, I think, goes slightly up, and then
it's almost
calories go down. Like all the graphs kind of point down, and the amount of vegetable oils that go up is so extreme that it's very hard to not be a little bit interested in that correlation data. I mean, you introduce vegetable oils in a population and chronic disease skyrockets.
Yeah, they see that all the time. Whenever you start introducing this, chronic disease, obesity, everything starts coming into the population.
Usually you will also increase your, not always, but usually these vegetable oils, they go hand in hand with refined flour, with added sugar, added sweeteners.
Yeah.
Many of the products, they have the same kind of things lumped together, so it's difficult to exclude, but it seems like when you exclude the other things, it doesn't look good for the vegetable oil group.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And like you've been talking about, it's really difficult to find good studies on this. And, many studies that I've come across many of them are quite flawed, because when you look at, for example, the group that were given vegetable oils and then the other that were given animal fats, the other group was also given a higher amount of trans fats compared to the vegetable oil group. So it's different. It's really difficult to design and make a perfect study, I think, because you would have to lock people up, I think, since childhood and until they're 50 to get the perfect study, and you would have to control for everything in their diet and lifestyle and everything. So I think we're never going to be able to do a perfect nutritional study, at least on this, but
at least 10 years, like less than that would be I don't know.
Yeah. So and there are so many things that are confounding factors that we cannot always control for, because if you're following someone up for 10 years time period, you cannot control for everything in their life. But the most perfect studies that we then have, in my opinion, are the observational epidemiology studies. And you mentioned the case of Japan, for example. If I just summarize that a little bit, the sugar consumption in Japan has been decreasing since 1989, and saturated fat intake has been basically the same or a slight increase throughout the whole 20th century. But chronic diseases have kept going up, like in all Western countries. And then the case of China, sugar consumption, exactly the same since the 80s. But overweight, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, etc. keep going up. The case of USA, sugar consumption increased steadily, since the 19th century. And this is really interesting, over a 65-year time period, from 1920 to 1985, sugar consumption in the US was actually stable. It increased, there were small amounts of increases and decreases throughout that time, but in total it only increased by 5%. But obesity increased 532%. And since 2004, sugar intake in the US has actually been on the decline, but obesity is going up from 30% in 1999 to 42% in 2018, while sugar consumption is decreasing. And we could just go on and on here with other westernized countries, but the one thing that we always see that's going up in these countries is the vegetable oil consumption. So in some countries we see carbohydrates go up and then down a little bit. In other countries it just goes down. In other countries it just goes up. But the one thing that is always going up is the vegetable oil consumption in westernized countries. And it goes up in the same fashion as almost all chronic diseases. So it's just so striking to ignore these facts and keep recommending people to ingest vegetable oils, to put that, they say I think in the Icelandic recommendations, they say, how you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to use vegetable oils in cooking. And that's really problematic. Like you mentioned before, when we heat these oils, they're very unstable, these polyunsaturated fatty acids, so they become more dangerous. And, use it on your salads and so on and so forth. So I don't understand, and I would like some answers to why these observational data that we have for the past 50 to 100 years from many different countries, why they are ignored. Because and also the talk about processed food products. This is a highly processed product. It is bleached and it is highly refined, and it is, if you look it up on YouTube, how canola oil, for example, is made, it's disgusting. You would never want to go and lick the barrel that it's been kept in. It's disgusting. So I don't see why this is considered a health food, other than a marketing.
A lot of people will argue for the organic or mechanically pressed, which is, I would say that if I had to choose what to eat, I would rather eat an organic, exclusively mechanically pressed rapeseed oil or canola or whatever. If I had to choose, I would rather choose the mechanically organic than the highly processed one. Okay. But then again, what are you using the oil to? Most people are not putting it on the salad because it tastes nothing.
That's good.
So most people are using it for cooking. Okay, what happens when you cook up a PUFA, like a polyunsaturated fatty acid, PUFA? It's prone to oxidation. It's then the heating will create a problem. Especially the fried food, which is another category again, because the oils are heated and cooled and heated and cooled. It's context matters. Of course, that's the worst thing. But let's say the organic, mechanically pressed, you will put it in your pan, you will heat it to 200 degrees, it will get destroyed, it will get oxidized. Like chemically, it's not a good idea to eat that, at least what I think. And it's another topic that has brought my attention regarding these oils. It's deuterium. Have you been into the space of deuterium?
No.
No. So deuterium is the I'm no expert myself, but I encourage people to look up the Professor Laszlo G. Boros, which has kind of used a lot of his time in his career to investigate deutonomics. It's really just a study of the heavy hydrogen isotope. So hydrogen is like the first atom on the periodic table. So it has one proton. The next on the table is helium, two protons. And so it goes on. You increase one proton, you get further down the lane on the periodic table. The deuterium is hydrogen with one neutron, which will make it double the size, double the molecular weight. In the energy process in the cells or in the mitochondria, we are very dependent on hydrogen flowing efficiently. Through the electronic transport chain, it's very important that hydrogen flows efficiently to create a gradient from the inner to the outer membrane. And when hydrogen is pumped out, the concentration will increase on the outer part, and it will passively flow in again and turn the ATP ACE, the ATP motor complex, to create ATP, which is energy, and we need energy to survive. And the products the products which has more water has more hydrogen and also more deuterium. It's only maybe like in the world, it's 99 point something percent is regular hydrogen. And a tiny bit is deuterium. And deuterium creates tighter and harder bonds. So more deuterium is found in, for example, ligaments and in bone, which creates a harder structure. So it's very important to have a small, tiny bit. But too much of it will create problems. And what this scientist talks about is like the deuterium content in food, and there are like the deuterium in carbohydrate is bigger because it's more water in carbohydrates compared to, for example, fat. So he argues for a low carb ketogenic animal diet to have better energy productions in the cell. And he also talks about vegetable oils being relatively high in deuterium, which also is another rabbit hole to go down in to understand that metabolic health and our mitochondria works worse now because of the higher content of deuterium. Like it's more hydrogen stopping the flow. It's like having your garage. You have a garage that is fitted for a small car, and then you get a SUV, which will not fit. So if you have cells and mitochondria which are very dependent on flowing of hydrogen, and then you suddenly have a higher percentage of content of hydrogen that are twice as big, then simple logic tells you that that is part of the increased problem of metabolic dysfunction. So at least I find the topic and the logic and the evidence that Dr. Boris lays out to seem like a part of the puzzle. It's a lot of reasons why people have poor metabolic health. It's like a puzzle piece, many pieces to create this dysfunction, but maybe this is one of the pieces.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think there are so many pieces to this puzzle, and I don't think we know all the pieces, but we're trying at least. What do you think about the next point regarding dairy and alternatives? They say in the recommendations that while dairy remains part of the diet, there's a push for moderate consumption, particularly of low-fat varieties. And then they talk about plant-based alternatives also being recognized, offering options for those who avoid dairy. So if we take just first milk or dairy milk in itself and not the plant-based alternatives. Now, what do you think about this one? only low-fat milk and dairy products and in moderate amounts. Do you agree on this one?
The thing is that there are two main reasons that people can be intolerant to milk. It's the lactose, which is quite familiar, like it's the sugar content in milk that can be problematic, and it's also some people can be like sensitive to the milk protein. And it's some people are thinking, or some case reports are seeing that people with, for example, newly diagnosed diabetes type 1 can stop the disease progression, or even increase the insulin production of the pancreas by avoiding milk protein, or like going for the typical paleo diet lifestyle. And scientist in Hungary called Sophia Clements is possible to look up on PubMed and also on YouTube, where she has lectures, and she talks about case reports. Of course, it's anecdotal data, and we don't know long-term effects, but it's they are suspicious about grains and also milk proteins, that it can be triggering for the immune system in the development of diabetes type 1. So milk or milk products can be good and beneficial if you are able to tolerate it, and it will also have all the essential amino acids and some essential vitamins. But low fat contra high fat, well, then we are into the topic again that fat is a problem. And we have already kind of put a question mark on that topic. But when you have more low fat, then it will often have a relatively higher protein content. And if you are intolerant to the protein, then that will increase the problem. Let's say the person is not, or the people are not intolerant to the milk protein, then you are also saying that the fat itself is, you're playing out the logic that the fat itself is what creates obesity, which is also kind of blaming fat for what maybe sugar have done, and refined carbohydrates, and also maybe refined vegetable oils. Yeah, going low fat does not seem to work very well. And a lot of low-fat products will also have additives put in, because the fat content is lower. So to keep the product quality or top-notch, then you need to put in something else in replacement of the fat. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
You did. It's at least the point about what you said about the additives. I think people maybe aren't aware of that. At least I wasn't aware of that for many years, that all these low-fat products contain other additives, either sugar, or if you find a yogurt that is both low-fat and you see on the label no added sugar or something like that, there's a lot of sweeteners. That's a discussion for another time as well, which can be problematic. But what about just milk in general? Because there's a lot of discussion around raw milk, and at least in the US, raw milk, it's allowed to sell that in many states, while it is not allowed in other states. But here in Norway, we do have raw milk, but there are some really, really strange regulations there. I read them the other day. It's like you're only allowed to buy raw milk directly from a farm if you're just accidentally in the area of some farmer who produces raw milk and you buy it. It's not. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, also, as far as I know, it's something like that. So it's not something that you can push commercially, but you can sell it coincidentally or randomly, some sort of way. It's like when we are like, because that's like also bound to history. Like the dairy business was really dirty on the timeline. Part of the history, they fed the cows leftovers from the alcohol industry, which is where like nutrient poor residues or leftover from the production, and also the facilities were in themselves quite shady, and the cows got sick and the milk got bad, and they found out that by boiling the milk you could get rid of the bacteria or the pathogens that created the disease. And so the logic kind of played out that if you just on a regular basis just boil the milk, which is pasteurization, then you can have a safer product, which is true when the playing field is as it is. But if you have a safe business and you drink the milk relatively fast after tapping, then it's not a problem. And if we are having these regulations because of diseases or the potential to cause death, then it's very interesting that we are allowed to sell alcohol in the stores, which are responsible for several thousands of deaths each year. And maybe you could pinpoint one or two, I think, but as far as I've read, maybe you can pinpoint during the last 5 or 10 years that you can pinpoint a couple of deaths, maybe 1, 2, or 3 to the raw milk industry. And then you are at the same time saying that alcohol is allowed in the stores, then it's very difficult to see that logic.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I haven't thought about it this way.
And raw milk will, on average, have a higher amount of bacteria. We have people with lactose intolerance, which can drink raw milk because you have the bacteria creating the enzyme lactase. A lot of people that are lactose intolerant can, for example, eat raw cheese. Raw cheese is allowed to sell in Norway in stores. You could find Parmesan or Grana Padano, etc., which are unpasteurized. So the bacteria content will be different in the raw milk, and those can also colonize the gut, which can be beneficial. And you will also have less chance of the vitamins being destroyed when you are not boiling it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a really good point that you made there about the lactase in the milk. So many people who are lactose intolerant, like you pointed out, they don't produce or not enough lactase, which is the enzyme that you need to digest milk sugar or lactose. So, but in raw milk, that is unpasteurized milk, the bacteria, like you said, we have more bacteria in that milk, and the bacteria produces lactase, which is the enzyme that you need to break down the milk sugar. So a lot of people do a lot better on raw milk, people who think or who are lactose intolerant, and then they try raw milk or unpasteurized milk, and they do fine with that. And also another thing regarding the milk protein, the structure of the milk protein changes a little bit. Pasteurization, and that is also makes it a little bit more difficult to digest and maybe more irritable to our body. So unpasteurized milk has in many cases, it's shown a lot of benefits in reducing allergies and eczema in children, and like you mentioned, improving gut health and so forth. So it is, like you mentioned today, why we started pasteurization. It's kind of because there was a lot of issue with unpasteurized milk before, with bacteria and diseases coming from the ingestion of raw milk. But that's also the hygiene and the safety was not as it is today. the production lies in health standards and regular monitoring of the milk and the milk production facilities. So frequent testing for pathogens, maintaining clean and sanitary conditions in milking areas, and ensuring that the cows are healthy and not carriers of milk-borne pathogens. That's essential, and that's proven in many cases in at least the US, where there's a lot of big raw milk producing farms that do really, really well. They're, seeing that it's completely safe. So if we have the right practices, I don't see the point of banning raw milk or, banning it from stores. Like here in Norway, we cannot sell that in stores, but we can sell alcohol in stores, which is proven to be really dangerous and toxic and causing deaths, like you mentioned. So, yeah.
If you would have just had a warning label saying that you could get sick from it, and people could take the decision themselves, as with alcohol, as with cigarettes, and you're basically saying that people are not grown up enough, you're taking the responsibility away from the consumer, and at the same time you're giving the responsibility to the consumer on something that is highly addictive and highly dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's so ironic and sad, to be honest. And also, if I would have had a source of raw milk, I would go there before the store-bought any day. But unfortunately, it's hard to come by. But I would rather drink that any day the week if I had the opportunity. I would also pay more for it. I would also pay more for it.
Absolutely. If you come and visit me sometime, I can accidentally drive past one farmer here who has the best raw milk and yogurt and cheese, and it's amazing. So
you can hook me up with a dealer.
Yes, I can.
I need a dealer.
Yeah. It's awesome. My husband he is crazy for this, all the benefits of raw milk. And, we have seen how he produces his milk, and it's fantastic. His farm is fantastic. So we accidentally were there just before Christmas and bought, I don't know how many liters of raw milk, because the cows they're going to stop milking for several weeks or months now during winter. So we have a freezer stocked with good quality raw milk, and we got instructions on how to thaw it again and in the best and safest way, and it's so good. And we're seeing a lot of good improvements in my eldest son allergies. He has allergies and eczema, and after we started giving him raw milk, his allergies are reducing. We kind of had the first summer. He has seasonal allergies. We kind of had the first summer last summer that we could, see if it had some effect. And he did not have to take antihistamines throughout the whole summer. So that was a big change from all the past summers. And in regards to his eczema, for example, he has a lot less outbreaks. So a huge difference there. Of course, someone could argue that he's growing up and he's growing it out, but
correlation. What is correlation? What's causality?
Yeah. So there are a lot of good things that we experience. And regarding gut health, in my opinion, I have struggled with digestive issues since I was a teenager, and I've always bought some probiotics and prebiotics to improve my gut health every now and then when I need. But all I need now is a few days of raw milk, and then my gut health is restored. If I've been sick with gastroenteritis or something like that, and then afterwards my digestive system is kind of a mess, a few days with raw milk will restore my gut health. I've experienced that. So not just once, it happens, it's amazing. And we swear by this, and we accidentally are passing by the farmer.
Accidents that happen several times during the rain.
Yes.
We are accidentally here again. Okay. Well, we might.
Nice. We know another one who lives on a farm just right next to him, so we're accidentally always driving by when we're visiting. So
well, accidents happen.
Yeah, they do. I know this conversation we could go on and on and on, but if we take just shortly the last points here, sustainable, or one thing that we kind of didn't mention, but we have mentioned a little bit in regards to the plant-based milks. I just need to place a big question mark about that. Plant-based milks and yogurts. These, because like we've talked about, they are often highly processed, even though you can find products that are less processed, like coconut milk that doesn't need much processing to be made. But if we take, for example, oat milk, and if you think about it, oats don't, there's not much liquids in oats to be extracted. So if you look at the ingredients label of oat milk, it's actually not that compelling. It's water and then oats, 10%, rapeseed oil, and then some acidity regulators, added minerals, added vitamins, and salt. So aside from the fact that the third ingredient is a highly processed, refined, and bleached seed oil, which turns into many compounds in this processing and also in our body that are proven to be right up dangerous for our health. Another thing that's missing in any discussion regarding dietary guidelines, and we have touched on, is the presence of anti-nutrients in a lot of plant foods. So we can add as much minerals and vitamins into these milks, but oats contain anti-nutrients, so we're not taking up all the minerals and vitamins that we maybe think we are taking up by consuming these milks. But what is your view on plant-based milks?
I know that some variants can come without the oils, which I would encourage if you think that it's a non-negotiable thing. One could also think that someone uses it as a substitute because they have problems with milk protein or lactose intolerance. It's okay. But we also have to, okay, where are these coming from? The coconut milk is not actually, it's not coming from our neighborhood. The almonds are not farmed from this area. They are, when we're talking about environment and sustainability, etc., then these milks are at least a worse option than Norwegian local produced regular milk.
Yeah.
Yeah, anti-nutrients, which are a problem. I think we have kind of covered it in the other topics indirectly.
Yeah, exactly. If we move on to the next one, then sustainable seafood. They talk about that given Norway's rich marine resources, seafood is still recommended as a healthy protein source, but there's a strong emphasis on choosing sustainable option to protect marine ecosystems. So what do you think about this? Is it easy to buy sustainable, wild-caught salmon in the store, for example?
It's very difficult. It's in my experience, it's nearly impossible. There have been periods of time where you have gotten the opportunity to buy organic frozen salmon, for example, where they've been fed krill instead of processed corn, grains, soy, etc. I try to limit my consumption of seafood to the bare minimum. There are different problems with heavy metals. There are more microplastic and other harmful toxic chemicals, especially in the fatty variants like salmon. And the farm raised are even worse because they eat non-appropriate food, and they have a increased omega-6, omega-3 ratio, and content of minerals and vitamins are poor. So it's a lot of reasons why I don't buy fish, and I also, unfortunately, because I think wild caught fish away from human activities are like it's a superfood, but unfortunately it's super expensive, it's risky, and the chances of you getting it is very small, and the chances of over time accumulating toxic chemicals are bigger, and the nutrients, you can get the same nutrients from grass-fed cows.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. You mentioned fish farming or salmon farming. That's a significant industry in Norway now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's a big money
Yeah.
area.
Yeah, it
So we
is.
could argue for the interest of the government to maybe increase the consumption, but that's speculative area.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they maybe made these recommendations on not so, they're saying in the recommendations that there's a strong emphasis on choosing sustainable options to protect marine ecosystems, but I don't see that fish farming is a sustainable option or protecting marine
I
ecosystems.
would rather argue for the exact opposite.
Yeah, exactly. So two last points here, the social and cultural aspects of eating. The guidelines highlight, of course, the importance of enjoying meals with others and embracing mindful eating practices and encourage the appreciation of traditional Norwegian foods, adapting them with new dietary framework to maintain cultural relevance. I just want to ask you here, what about peer pressure in meal settings? Do you experience that? Do you eat a lot more differently than others when you're at lunch, for example?
Definitely. It's a source of conversation. People
Mm,
are generally interested and they find it weird maybe that I eat red meat almost every day. Red
mm,
meat, eggs. I've also started to incorporate fermented foods. So
mhm,
I've started to make fermented vegetables at home in these special fermentation jars that where you have this hole in the top lid and you have air coming out but not air coming in, a
mm,
water lock. So I've really started to see the potential and the benefits of eating fermented food, like you said, with non-pasteurized dairy, probably
mhm,
helping with gut microbiome and asthma allergies. So are fermented foods really associated with less of these diseases? So I
mhm.
think gut bacteria, but gut microbiome is very important to optimizing human health.
Interesting.
But yeah, so I get some looks and I get some questions, but people are interested. They and my arguments hold water, I think, it
Mhm,
seems, when it comes to environment, climate, nutrition content.
mhm.
People seem to kind of be on board the logic. But I think it's very important to that eating is a part of culture, part of social setting, that it's non-stressful. I have a daughter that's almost 2 years old. I want to be relaxed. I want it to be chill. I want it to be high quality. And but I also don't want to be overly strict. I don't want to create an environment where we
Mhm,
never eat candy, where we never eat ice cream. I want to have a little bit slack because a little bit slack will maybe, I think, create a better environment long term.
mhm.
But one can increase homemade variants and one can try to control the environment at home at best possible way without creating a restrictive or stressful food environment.
Yeah, I agree with that. Can I ask you then, how is your diet on a typical day?
First meal around 12. I eat very often something red meat, maybe egg, maybe some cheese. Now also the couple of last weeks, I've started to incorporate fermented food, and this batch is fermented kale.
Mhm,
Uh, Fermented root vegetables is now being made, so it's finished in 1 or 2 weeks.
mhm,
So around for dinner, we try to have something with meat, prioritize red meat rather than poultry and pig because they are more often fed corn, soy, etc. And we try to have some vegetables that are not so irritative, rather more on the fruit side than on the vegetable side. And we also eat some rice, some pasta, some potatoes, but the ratio is lower than what you would typically see on a Norwegian plate.
What about dairy, milk, and do you have that?
Yeah, Greek yogurt. Often we have Grana Padano or Parmesan cheese, which are unpasteurized, like for snacks, taking with if we're going out, small snacks for our child, which is easy on the go. Some yogurts which are with flavor, but then sugar and flavor rather than the artificial ones.
Yeah.
And heavy cream, whipping it up, and for example, having a fruit yogurt or honey on top is for me a perfect dessert. People would say it's restrictive and blah blah blah, but I would say it's if you find something you really like as a dessert kind of thing, which is also relatively good for you, so tasting good and being good for you, you have a really good option, I would say.
Yeah.
I also have some. If I make broth, I try to do that sometimes if I have bones lying around. I kind of accumulate bones in the freezer, and when the batch is big enough, I make broth.
Yeah.
But I also have dried broth, which I just add into boiling water to get the nutrient content. Gelatin, powderized, and collagen is also something I have lying around. I can, in a stew or something, I could easily just add some gelatin to increase the protein content and also the amino acids that you not normally get that high amounts of in regular meat, for example. For example, glycine, which is very high in collagen and gelatin, and broth compared to other sources. So, yeah, the benefits, we could go into the weeds, but I think the chances that worst case scenario, I increase my protein intake and it's not super beneficial, but I'll take the risk if you kind of see that. And that's kind of, and we enjoy some ice cream now and then. It's sometimes we make it at home, but sometimes it's store bought, and some chocolate we try to take in the high cocoa ones rather than the regulars.
Yeah. Fruit, I didn't hear you mention fruit. Do you include that in your diet?
Yeah, I do. I think that it's for humans. I think we have been evolutionary groomed to have fruit and vegetables in seasons. So I try to eat a little bit more during the summer than during the winter, but I'm not so super strict about it. I think as long as you're metabolically healthy, then some fruits is during the whole year is totally fine. We could also talk about how it maybe feeds the microbiome with the fiber. I'm not a huge fiber fan in general, but I think maybe it's beneficial for bacteria. So I think it's can be useful to include something.
Yeah. So you're not including whole grains in your diet like recommended because of the fiber content?
Well, I eat grains or, for example, bread, etc. as a dessert.
Yeah.
It's a dessert thing. It's a maybe once a week thing.
Yeah.
It's not a regular thing. Like I've been brought up on oats and grains every day for 2 to 3 meals. But now, after a couple of years, I've reduced it to I'm not saying it's not like never, but it's maybe max 1 or 2 times a week, and I I treat the food as a dessert. So it's a dessert kind of thing.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, that's interesting. Last point in the recommendation was just about water, having water as a primary beverage. And I think that makes sense, minimizing sugary drinks and...
I agree. It's one of those things that is, makes sense. And I agree.
Is there something that you find missing about the recommendations, something you would like to point at?
I think we may touch down on the main areas, and I think it's important to just talk about these subjects. I feel like it's important to understand that these recommendations are not set in stone. I don't think that the science have concluded good enough, even though it seems like it is. So I think it's important to just have the conversation going. The subjects it's evolving, and I think it seems like people are waking up, or it could be that I am into this, and therefore I think that people are waking up. But it seems like for me that I'm trying to be objective about it, but it seems like people are kind of more interested, and a lot of things are not making perfect sense, and people are feeling it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I feel like people are waking up a little bit more, but we could be a little bit... That opinion could be biased a little bit because, the algorithm on TikTok and Instagram, it changes when you change your interests. So 4 or 5 years ago, my Instagram feed did not look like it looks like now. It looks like, there's a lot of people like you popping up on my Instagram, talking about various different things in regards to diet and health all the time. So that's kind of maybe why I feel like there's so much awakening going on regarding this. But in all, I think people are in general really interested in wanting to be healthy, wanting to eat the right foods and be healthy and don't get diseases and live a good life. So I think everyone is interested in these topics and getting to the conclusion, whatever that conclusion is, but something that brings them their happy life, I think.
Being able to thrive. I think it's a very nice word in the English vocabulary, like thrive, to be the best version of yourself that you possibly can. And I think many people want to get that.
Yeah. Well, Simen, thank you so much for our talk. It's been really, really interesting. And I think we need to talk again. There are so many things that we can just, go down the rabbit holes of. We just touched on every topic here, and we can go down all of the rabbit holes later. Definitely. If we want.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining me today, Simen, and I look forward to our next talk.
Next time with accidental raw milk.
Yes. Yeah. We'll do an in-person talk where we accidentally drive by the farm.
Yeah. I'm looking forward. All right.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning into this episode. If you're looking for more information or want to check out any studies I reference, head on to my website, babyletsmove.com. You can also join me for a workout through my app called Baby Let's Move, available in both App Store and Google Play. And don't forget to connect with me on Instagram and YouTube for even more content. If you enjoyed today's show, please consider giving it a 5-star rating or a like and share it with a friend. It really helps me reach more amazing listeners like you. Until next time, keep moving and stay healthy.